Hello everyone. We are getting ready to start our live session today. If you're watching live, let us know in the chat if you can hear us. John is here with me. We'll see him soon. John, can you say hello?
Hi, everybody.
So hopefully you heard his voice, but you'll see him soon. He's gonna be talking to all of us very quick. So if you are live with us, please type in the chat if you can hear me, and if you heard John, we'll be back right in 1 minute. Can you say hello?
Hi, everybody.
So hopefully you heard his voice, but you'll see him soon. He's gonna be talking to all of us very quick. So if you are live with us, please type in the chat if you can hear me, and if you heard John, we'll be back right in 1 minute. The audio is working. Okay, are you ready? Okay, great. And we are back. Welcome everyone to the Language Learning Summit live session for Saturday, February 17th. Hello everyone. Please, if you're watching live with us, leave a comment and say where you are watching from. We always love to hear where people are joining us from. And today I have a special guest with lots of very important and interesting information. But first, we want to know more about him. Hello, John. How are you?
Well, I'm very well, thank you, Paulino. And first of all, I want to thank you very much for inviting me to do this brief interview and presentation on language acquisition here at the Language Learning Summit.
For those who don't know the famous John D'Amato, please tell us about yourself and what are you doing these days?
Well, first of all, I'm Josephine D'Amato's only son, and that's probably the most important thing in an Italian family, that's for certain. Yeah. A little bit about my background to try to show it gives me the prerogative to actually sit here and act like I know anything. My certification is in French and Spanish and the teaching of French and Spanish. And over the course of the years, I've had an opportunity to teach from grade levels, kindergarten through university. And that's where my background is. It's in language teaching and most recently language acquisition. And in the course of my time, I've not only taught languages, I have had the opportunity to work within publishing. I'm a published author of French materials, Spanish materials, English as a second language. And I currently manage my own business called John D'Amato Language Seminars, LLC. And the sole mission of this endeavor, my business, is to work with language departments on site around the United States and also abroad periodically in the interest of improving instruction and trying to get everyone in sync with all of our national and state mandates that are focused on proficiency. And so, you know what, Paulino, maybe if you could put up the first slide, which shows my contact information.
Definitely, it's on. And for everyone here, you have the title of our session today, Encourage Proficiency by Evolving from Editor to Applied Linguist. But also we have your contact information. It would be great if everyone follows John, because not only you give great seminars, but you also share some great information on your channels.
Absolutely. And one of the reasons why I wanted to show you this, by way of information, if you'd like to contact me with regard to workshops, in-service needs, this is my contact information. Also, for those of you that might be interested, I'm going to be using a PowerPoint presentation today because I think it's a lot easier to look at than my face, to be honest with you. And so if you're interested at all in the PowerPoint, if you would simply email me at the email address that you see on the screen, I would be more than happy to send it to you. First of all, and then if we go to the second slide, please, if you wouldn't mind, please, Paulina.
No problem. Yes.
This is the commercial break, obviously, but I want you to know that next month I have a new book, professional development book for language educators coming out. It's called In Search of Language, Enhancing Language Acquisition in the Classroom. If you go to my website, which was listed on the previous slide, you will be able to see where it's offered, what the cost is, and information with regard to purchasing it. But enough of this. Our time's limited, so let's get started, and let's go to the first slide, please, Paulino. This would be number 3.
Definitely.
Okay. Now, I want you to understand what I'm talking about when I talk about editor to applied linguistics. It seems to me what I try to do is simplify what our role is in the classroom. Historically, our role has been that of the editor in the world language classroom. We spend a lot of time editing what kids say, editing what kids write. And sometimes, actually, it doesn't work. It works against what we're trying to achieve with kids, okay? The applied linguist is much different than the editor. The applied linguist is someone that is in search of how the human mind creates and acquires language. This, to me, is very important because if we're going to be language, quote-unquote, teachers, it's very, very important to try to understand how the human mind actually creates it. Interestingly enough, and paradoxically, I guess you might say, the discipline of applied linguistics, which is the study of the creation and acquisition of language, is not part of the certification of most language teachers, quote unquote. And so basically, we end up in a situation where, yes, we have plenty of methods, and yes, we've probably taken linguistics, which basically talks about language production, how it is actually produced, what a fricative is, what a plosive is, what an interdental D is. You get to discover your velar palate, all those exciting things. Has absolutely nothing to do with how the human mind creates and acquires language. And I think when we talk about shifting to a more proficiency-oriented classroom, I see that shift as a shift from mastery to proficiency and from being an editor to being an applied linguist. So having said that, let's stay on slide 3 and let's talk about this. The first point I'd like to make is the editor versus the applied linguist. The editor believes that language learning is a logical process. The applied linguist believes that language acquisition is largely a psychological process. And what I'd like to do is try to explain that to you. First of all, I think we have an insight already on what we mean about making language logical. And that is primarily the fact that we proceed page by page through textbooks. If it's June, it must be double object, or let's say it's February, it must be double object pronouns because that's what's in the book. We start with a certain sequence, structural sequence. We start off with articles, male and masculine and feminine, etc. And we march to the present tense of regular verbs, irregular verbs, and then we have this certain logic, building blocks type of approach. And quite frankly, that's not the way language is acquired. Language is actually acquired quite randomly. Most of the language we own, we don't even know where it came from. So having said this, let's go to slide 4, please, Paulina.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit more about the language learning hypothesis, all right? The notion that languages are learned and it's a logical approach. It means that the attitude is that language is consciously stored in the brain and that there's a focus on rules and grammar. And it's a very concrete sequential process. And this is true. I've heard a million times if the subjunctive suddenly appears during the first year, people want to know, well, wait a minute, that doesn't appear until second year language. Well, who said? It should appear when it is communicatively appropriate. That having been said, I want to do a little quote here. If you go to the next slide, which is slide 5, I have a little something here from Stephen Krashen, and if you'll excuse me, I'm going to just be reading this off the page. The ability to use consciously learned language is severely limited. Now, what that means is simply this, if I just might state this. Let's say, for example, a child has memorized something. I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's, let's say, for example, poetry, okay? It's consciously learned. The fact of the matter, it has no application. Language is all, success at language, proficiency is based around situational appropriateness. When you have memorized language, or language that's been discreetly learned, it has no value unless the situation actually makes itself present. In other words, if you're standing at a bus stop and suddenly start to recite poetry in Spanish or in French or in Italian, and it doesn't fit the context in which you find yourself, then basically it serves no purpose. The second point is consciously learned language does not provide fluency and contributes little to communication. And that's true. Again, language is driven by context and situation. Acquisition is responsible for ability to communicate. And I think this is an extremely important point that Krashen makes. As a matter of fact, I'd like to drop down, if you wouldn't mind, just a little bit further to 1, 2, 3, 4, the sixth bullet that says accuracy increases via acquisition. And quite frankly, my friends, I think this is something that it gives me pause, and I think it's something we need to think about. Historically, our approach to classrooms historically has been emphasizing accuracy up front, assuming that functionality in language will follow. And according to Krashen, and I believe this, and you see it in nature, is that eventual accuracy in a language is a byproduct of acquisition of the language. The more language you acquire, the more you have the opportunity actually to use the language, the more accurate it is used. And so it kind of flips our classrooms on their heads, if you would, to the extent that it's not accuracy first. Accuracy is a destination, not a point of departure. And that true accuracy in a language is a byproduct of the acquisition process first. Sounds paradoxical, but that's the way it works. And that is what language acquisition theory is all about. That's what applied linguistics theory is. I guess the point of departure here, friends, is that in the end result, language doesn't really care what we think. And I think that's an important point to remember. We either, as language instructors, learn to accommodate language in our classrooms, or it will defy us at every turn. It does not conform to our classroom beliefs. Language is acquired a certain way, and understanding full well that the classroom is an artificial environment, we need to respect those characteristics in the language acquisition process. And the first one I want to kind of emphasize with you is that, yeah, we all want accuracy, but it's a destination, not a point of departure. And that accuracy is a byproduct of the acquisition process. Let's go on. I don't want to go through every single item because of time constraints, but let's go to slide 6, Paulino, please.
Yes.
There's a difference between the language learning hypothesis, or if you would, the monitor hypothesis, and the language acquisition hypothesis. It's the basic belief on the part of applied linguists that when we acquire language, we're largely unaware of it. We're unaware of the aspects that are acquired. In other words, we have no idea whether it's an adjective, an adverb, whether it's the pluperfect subjunctive, whether it's a completed or a repeated past action. We store language, if you would, the language acquisition hypothesis, subconsciously in the brain, and largely it is a random process. So if you were to compare these two slides, basically slide 4 and slide 6, which we're not going to do now. We're not going to do that. But when and if you ask for these slides and I send them to you, if you compare the two, you'll see that they are diametrically opposed from one another. And these are the choices we have to face. So my question to you is this: where are you? Are you the editor, or are you in fact the applied linguist? Are you the editor moving toward being the applied linguist? Let's go on to slide 7, please.
Yes.
Language error in psycholinguistics. And this is part of the whole notion of the language acquisition hypothesis, and certainly the notion that language is a psychological process. From what I can gather from my own instruction, the field of psycholinguistics, and whatever research I've read historically, there are a raft of psycholinguistic characteristics, if you would, a person's psycholinguistic profile, okay, that certain characteristics lend themselves to people who actually are multilingual. And if you reflect on yourself, and anyone in our community that tends to be multilingual, trilingual, lo que sea, whatever it might be, there are three very salient characteristics. One is risk-taking, one is vulnerability, and one is intuition. And I want to explain these characteristics, very, very important, in fact, because it's the potting soil for language acquisition. The point I'd like to make here is simply this. To the extent that your classroom encourages risk-taking, vulnerability, and intuition, this will, in fact, dictate what success children have in your classroom acquiring a language. So let's take a look at each term. Risk-taking does not mean jumping out of a plane at 38,000 feet while conjugando el verbo haber en el pluscuamperfecto de subjuntivo. That's not what we're talking about, all right? Conjugating the verb haber in the pluperfect subjunctive. That's not linguistic risk-taking. What linguistic risk-taking means, in essence, is a willingness on the part of the person trying to acquire the learned language to confront more language than what they own. If you're a native speaker of Spanish, French, or Italian, you own more Spanish, French, and Italian than I do. For me to interact with you requires a certain nerve, if you would. I have to repress any ego that I have about it, knowing full well that I am in the more submissive role, if you would, okay? You hold all the linguistic cards. In order for me to acquire language, I have to interact with you. That takes a willingness on my part to confront more language than what I own. Where's your classroom on that? If you believe what I'm saying to you, and again, it's a completely Socratic question. If you believe this, then where do you stand on this in your classroom? Because the kids can only risk take to the extent that you allow it, and also, may I add, to the extent that you yourself are a risk taker, instructionally and educationally. Vulnerability means the willingness to err for the broader goal of communication. Quite frankly, if you're the editor, you probably find that error is anathema to you. And so in the end result, it's very important to recognize the fact that error is part of the language acquisition process. And the applied linguist, the classroom that's focused on proficiency, basically establishes an environment in the classroom where the kids are safe to create errors in the classroom, in the interest of language acquisition, in the interest for the greater good of communication. This has an awful lot to do with the environment that you as the instructor create in the classroom. The last one is intuition, and this may be the prize jewel of the three. I don't know, it depends where all this lands with you, but I'm going to open up with the statement by saying to you that language is ambiguous. I think we all recognize this. You take a look at what happens politically in this country on a daily basis, you realize just how ambiguous language can be. All right. My point is simply this: is that it's all we have. Language is ambiguous, but it is, in fact, it is all we have. But it does not fulfill our needs. It's not adequate for human needs. And so you're listening to me right now. You know what you're doing? You are not understanding me verbatim. You're intuiting what I'm saying. You're filtering what I'm saying through the filter of your own life experience as a teacher. Okay? And that's what we do with one another. And so, for example, in interacting with native speakers, quite often there are things that are said that I don't quite understand. And so what I do is I use my intuition, which means that I look for extra linguistic cues, facial expressions, body language, hand gestures, the context in which the message is being delivered. And so these are the three characteristics I want to emphasize with you. And when I say to you that, we talk about the language acquisition hypothesis and that language is more of a psychological phenomenon than it has ever been a logical one, this is what I'm talking about. So that's having been said, let's go to the next slide, Paulino, which is slide 8.
Yes.
The editor versus the applied linguist. The editor believes that students make mistakes, and the applied linguist believes that students make errors. Now, you're probably saying, oh, come on now, don't start playing semantic games with me, and I'm not. there is a big difference between a mistake and an error, and I would like to specifically explain. I'm going to start off with you by simply saying this. Your kids do not make mistakes. They make errors. My wish for you, if I had a magic wand, I could just absolutely reach through the screen right now and wave it over you. I would expunge the word mistakes from your instructional vocabulary. Let's go to slide 9, and let me show them, Paulino, what the difference between an error and a mistake is.
Yes.
Are we there?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Let's start over on the left. Now, an error is inventive. Okay. In other words, quite frankly, your children, when they are trying to use their best Spanish, French, Italian, German, Japanese, Chinese, Igbo, Arabic, quoi que ce soit, lo que sea, but when they're trying to use the language that it's their best language today. So what you're hearing, naturally speaking, are errors, right? And errors are inventive. It's the byproduct of invention. They are dynamic. What does that mean? It means that basically it is language on its way to becoming standard. It's somewhere in transit. It is a transitional influence. The notion that it is language again that is moving from non-standard towards standard and will only be a temporary blip on the screen. It's just like, for example, if you were to ask a small child, if a small child came to you and in English said, "Daddy, I run home to tell you that I eated an ice cream cone at school," what are your options? As a parent, you might ignore it, or if you're more the editor, you might take out Warner's Handbook of English Grammar and run them through the past tense, or you might simply say something like, "Really, honey, you ran home to tell Daddy that you ate an ice cream cone? What kind of ice cream cone did you eat?" In which case the child will say, "I eated an ice cream cone." What I'm trying to say is we don't fret about that. We recognize it's an error, and we also believe that through usage of the language and acquisition of the language, that error will, in fact, dissipate and disappear. Let's take a look at mistakes, which is now in the right column. You'll see the mistakes are diametrically opposed. Mistakes are fossilized. Oh, yes, those are ingrained patterns. They are static. They are not dynamic. They're not going to change. Let me put it this way, without some serious language arts remediation. It's a permanent influence by and large, and it's a conscious selection. And I want to make this point to you, and I hope you understand what I'm trying to say here. Language, one of the most important factors about language is that it identifies you as a member of a group. Did you hear what I just said? Language identifies you as a member of a group. And depending how hot you burn to be part of a group, you will do anything to the standard language to change it so that it identifies with the group that you want to be part of. Dude, do you see what I'm saying to you? And so what will happen in many cases when we talk about people making mistakes, it's normally not students that are trying to acquire a second language. It's actually native speakers. It's actually native speakers. I want you to ruminate on that a little bit. What I'm trying to do is posit in front of you in these two columns the fact that your kids, yes, anticipate error. It's going to happen. But don't accuse them of making mistakes because they don't. If you're dealing with native speaker classrooms and so forth, then in fact, you may find that what you're doing is working with language arts to try to remediate the mistakes, if you would, that the native speakers have chosen to actually make. It's different than those of us that are working with kids that are, let's say, for conversation's sake, native English speakers trying to learn Spanish, French, or some other language. Okay, Paulino, turn the page, please. Slide 10.
Yes.
Here's the good news. Simplify. Your kids only make two types of errors in the course of any year. Although it may seem like it's a tsunami of errors, there are only two basic types of errors that children make when they're trying to acquire a language. One is interlinguistic and one is intralinguistic. Big terms, simple concepts. Interlinguistic is brought about by the clash of two languages. If I am a Spanish teacher and I say to the students, if I say to a student, mira, tienes el libro, and the kid says, oh, wait a minute, I know that. It's yo, right? Yo, yeah, okay, yo, and then it's tango, right? Tango, or is it tango? Tango, okay, tango, yo, tango, and then they say el libro, so it's lola, los las, and if he flunked French the year before, it'd be le la le la. But in the end result, there's a very good chance that the kid's going to say yo tengo lo. All right? And that is because you have two different systems. You have the system that's booted up in the child that says subject, verb, object, and the new software you're trying to boot up with saying subject, object, verb. That is the nature of an interlinguistic error. They're very, very common and very, very recurrent year in, year out. Those of you that teach language, you hear the same interlinguistic errors every single year of instruction. It's not your fault. I'm giving you papal dispensation on this, all right? Now, next point, intralinguistic. These are the difficult ones because they're brought about by the unique peculiarities of a given language. For example, gender of nouns. We don't have that really in the English language. So it takes time to help kids understand that. How about in Spanish? Spanish teachers, ready? Seria estar. Give me a break. The fact is a 2-year-old Costarricense feels it in his heart, the difference between when to use ser and when to use estar. And those of us that are working with English-speaking children, it does not exist in English. And we go through all this profiling with regard to position, location, temporary condition, profession, permanent condition, all this basura, which the kids sit there, drives them crazy. It takes forever. So understand when you're dealing with interlinguistic errors and when you're dealing with intralinguistic errors, and understand that they are nothing but errors, not mistakes, and that of the two, the intralinguistic errors are the ones that take time. So, patience, patience. Let's go to slide 11, Paulino.
Yes.
All right. Important point, big difference between the editor and the applied linguist. The editor confuses error with mistakes, as we've just established, and believes both are negative and should be avoided. The applied linguist believes error is positive and should be encouraged. Now, what are we dealing with here? First of all, the editor not only confuses the two terms, errors and mistakes, but no matter what, the commonality is it's not a good thing. It's bad. All right? That's what the editor does. The applied linguist understands the role of error in the language acquisition process. He does not use the word mistakes, and he understands the role of error. And having said that, I would like you to go to slide 12, please, if you would, Paulino.
Yes.
All right. Now, this is your classic Venn diagram. And here I want to quote a little bit from Dr. Larry Selinker, my interpretation of his research, and Professor Emeritus from New York University. If you look at this illustration, you'll see a Venn diagram. On the left, you see the word speaker 1, or if you would, L1. And on the far right, you see speaker and then L2. And in the center, you see a shaded area. Okay? Here's what I'm trying to show to you. When we talk about kids, when they use language, all right, what are our choices? What are our choices, realistically speaking, in the language classroom? A, you can hear memorized speech, which is sumamente aburrido, all right? That's like listening to the chromatic scale all day long when you're actually hoping to hear some jazz, all right? You can hear nothing, which happens quite a bit in language classrooms, or you can hear language that is less than accurate. Of the three, I know which one I would opt for. It's the third one, of course. But my point to you is this. We call that language Spanglish. We call that language Franglais. In Chinese, we call it Chinglish, which is a very interesting turn of a phrase. We call it an ESL or ENL or ELL. We call it broken English. That's not the appropriate title. This is called interlanguage. And I want to explain to you the importance of this from Dr. Selinker, because it's the single most, to my way of thinking, liberating bit of instructional research that I've come upon. First of all, if you look, you notice there's an arrow that moves seemingly from left to right. What I'm trying to do is to show you that of nature, speakers in L1 always, people that are trying to acquire a second language, always move L1 into L2. They're always working out of the base. As much as we try to keep those languages separate, there's always linguistic interference between your first language and the language you're trying to acquire. We superimpose the structural and syntactical patterns of L1 over L2, thus creating, guys, and I'm not trying to chase you into real estate now, all right? But you are actually responsible for 3 languages in the classroom: L1, L2, and Interlanguage. Interlanguage is the language that we commonly refer to as an ish, Spanglish, or Franglais, or Chinglish, for example. Broken English, all right? But basically, this is a stage in the language acquisition process identified by Dr. Selinker. And if you look at that center stage, all right, the center of the Venn diagram, that's where most of our kids, if you allow for this, that's where they live linguistically, all right? It is the byproduct of moving L1 into L2, all right? This is, I might add, without this interlanguage, where are the kids going to risk-take, be vulnerable, and use their intuition? That's what it's all about. That's where that grows. Now, you have the prerogative as an instructor to say, can I hold out any hope for usage of standard language? Will I ever see kids operating on the right side of the Venn diagram? And my answer to you is yes. And I'm going to try to prove this to you through a rhetorical question. If you were an apartment dweller, how much money would you spend renovating the apartment for your landlord? I'm sure most of you would say very little, if anything whatsoever. And if I asked you why, you'd say because I don't own it. So we can set up an axiom. The axiom is people do not renovate what they do not own. I'm going to say it again. People do not renovate that which they do not own. Apply that axiom to language. You cannot ask kids to renovate language before they actually own the language. And that's what interlanguage is. It is the first purchase of linguistic real estate that a child purchases. It's not everything that you ever wanted. It's like the first home you bought. In many cases, what we end up with the first time is a fixer-upper, a handyman special, you know, something más humilde, all right? But the fact is it's ours. And what do? We immediately begin in the renovation process. We go down to the hardware store, we buy a gallon of paint, a pan, and a roller, and we start slapping some paint on the wall to improve it. We might even have a little money left over after the bank takes most everything we own, and we put a carpet down in the bedroom, perhaps. But the notion is the pride of ownership. Before you can ask people to renovate something, they have to own it. And that's what interlanguage is. Again, it is the first piece of linguistic ownership that it's linguistic real estate. So the question falls to us as language instructors, language teachers. What kind of linguistic mortgage brokers are we going to be? Are we going to float the kids the loan, or are we going to keep them in linguistic tenements? Let's go to slide 13, please, Paulino. How am I doing on time, Paulino? All right?
You're doing great.
Okay. We're almost there. Want to allow some time for any questions, should there be any. The editor versus the applied linguist. Slide 13. The editor believes grammar creates communication. The applied linguist believes vocabulary creates communication. I want to try to nail this for you, folks, because let's go to slide. I can't even begin to tell you how many language teachers I've been in contact with over the years. Thousands. and thousands, and how many departments that I've worked with. There is one single issue that divides language departments, and that's the issue of grammar/accuracy. More traditional teachers tend to be described by proficiency-oriented teachers as caring nothing about communication, everything is grammar. And more proficiency-oriented teachers get tagged by more traditional teachers as people that don't care about structure or syntax. Everything is fun and games, and there's no concern for grammar whatsoever. This is a false debate. I want to make a point to you immediately, and I want everyone to reflect on this. We as language teachers do not have the prerogative not to teach grammar. And I want you to understand the reason why. The reason's very simple. There are no instances of language on the face of God's earth that do not contain grammar and syntax. That's enough for me to understand that if I don't pay attention to, lend an eye to, if you would, grammar and structure and syntax, then I'm not giving a full presentation of language in the classroom. Dear hearts, the question is not whether you teach it or not, it's why you teach it. It's why you teach it. And I want to make this point to you. First of all, vocabulary is the communicative side of language. Grammar is not. If I say to you rapidly out of context, it has no communication. All you can do is identify it as an adverb because it ends in ly, and tell me that adverbs modify verbs, adjectives, and other adverbs. It really has no meaning. If I say apple, the chances of you saying noun are limited. You're going to get an idea of appleness, red, round, fruit, crunchy, apple pie. And then you'll extend motherhood, New York City, William Tell, Apple Computers, Stephen Jobs, maybe Original Sin. Who knows if that's where your mind is, okay? So my point to you is simply this. We need to focus on the communicative side of language. That does not mean that grammar and syntax shouldn't be attended to. It's why you teach grammar. If you're teaching it for communication, then what you will do is give short shrift to vocabulary. The purpose of grammar in a language is not to create communication because it cannot. The purpose of grammar in a language is in the avoidance of miscommunication. Now, I know that sounds like semantics, but it makes a world of difference. Because before you can worry about miscommunication, you must create communication first. If you go to slide 14, I'll try to illustrate this. So you're driving home from work in your 1993 Corolla, and you get passed on the right by the biggest Mercedes-Benz you've ever seen in your life. Splashes mud on your windshield, and what you're looking at now with BTTR is the vanity plate on the back of the car. Obviously, vanity plates always attempt to try to send a message to the person following. So I look at this in my 1993 Corolla, and I think this guy thinks he's better than me. But then I reflect a little bit and realize that maybe he might not think that at all. Maybe he's just bitter because he's getting divorced and the wife is actually getting the Mercedes-Benz. Or if I reflect further, I could suspect that perhaps this guy is a trust fund baby and maybe life is like butter to him. And so he didn't even have to pay for this. It was given to him. Or maybe he's just a famous baseball player and a great batter. Now, there's no doubt in my mind that BTTR has created communication, unfortunately, 4 different versions. So if I were now, everyone look at this license plate. If I were to take the letter I and place it between the B and the first T, we would now know that the word that's trying to be transmitted is bitter. And we've reduced the chance for miscommunication by 75%. And my friends, that's the role of grammar in the language acquisition process. The communication has been created. What grammar does is help us to avoid miscommunication. And for those of you that are more math logic or logical mathematical in nature, I'm going to set up an equation for you. Listen carefully. For those of you that are not, you're going to go cross-eyed at this point. All right? Consonants are to vocabulary what vowels are to structure. Consonants are to vocabulary what vowels are to structure. In other words, when people create vanity plates, what do they use predominantly? They use consonants. They do not use vowels. Okay? And that's why I say to you that vocabulary is the communicative side of language. Last thing. The editor believes that language is largely imitated and memorized. The editor believes language is largely imitated and memorized. The applied linguist believes language is largely self-selected and extemporaneous. Let's go to slide 16. And here this is all I'm going to say to you in the interest of time, and to allow you some time to ask questions should you choose. I want you to consider this fact, that you do not contain one word inside of you that you have not personally selected in any language through the course of your lifetime. Every single word inside of you, you have selected born in the crucible of situation and problem solving. Every single word. You haven't been taught, nor have you learned these words. You've acquired them because you've needed them. No one acquires vocabulary that they don't need. There are only two people in the world that use the word rubrics. You and your students, all right? The kids are a byproduct of it. Really, I'm talking about you and priests. I don't know whether you know this or not, but there's a book of rubrics, all right, which instruct the priest as to what to do on the altar when. That's it. Nobody else in the galaxy knows what a rubric is. If you don't believe me, go ask your mechanic. And go ask him, say, hey, Tony, how are your rubrics? See what he says to you. You'll get something like, not too bad, I'm taking penicillin, they're clearing up. No idea what you're talking about. We only own vocabulary we need. I think it's high time for us to recognize that language is self-selected. If you do not believe me, I will personally pay for a lexical exorcist to come to your house and exorcise whatever vocabulary words inside of you that you feel you didn't choose yourself. So let's go to the last slide, which is slide 17. I want to again remind you that this is all my contact information. If you would like to contact me for professional and staff development, if you're interested in my new book coming out middle of next month, this is the contact information. If you're interested in the slide presentation, the PowerPoint slides that you've been seeing today, all you need to do is email me and I will send them to you immediately and you can have them for future reference. So Paulino, thank you so much for inviting me. And if anyone would like to ask questions, comment, needs further clarification, I'll be glad to try.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for everything that you have shared with us, your years of expertise put together here. We are actually almost ready to set up for our next presenter at noon Central Standard Time. But I do want to ask you, because we have a you just presented to us a great framework to understand what's going on in the classroom with acquisition. I wanted to ask you if you could give us an example of how some of these theory translate in the classroom. You give us an example of the parent and child, and I'm sure you have many examples of how it could happen in the classroom. How do you see?
Well, for example, yeah, let me give you an example. And this is one that I standardly use and I run workshops on this. If you go to the point that kids need to be, they need to be encouraged to risk take, be vulnerable, and use intuition. If you believe that language is self-selected, if you believe that all students are candidates, and I underscore that word, candidates to acquire a second language. Any number of the things I talked to you about today, then it needs to be reflected within the activities that you do with kids. Now, I'll give you an example, one that I do standardly with teachers and tends to be a pretty popular workshop. Many of you may know, and perhaps not, that I've written a series of 2 albums in Spanish and in French rap songs. that are focused around specific linguistic functions. And basically what I try to do with those songs through animation is to get kids to focus on a specific language function based on visuals and based on music. Music is a very, very interesting vehicle for language acquisition because you can acquire lyrics subconsciously. You do not have to memorize the vocabulary. And so, for example, I might write a song, a rap in Spanish that is based around talking about and describing your family members. Okay? So let's encourage some risk-taking, vulnerability, and intuition. Let's encourage some self-selection of language. How about a song that goes on something like this? Dime cómo es tu familia y cuántas personas hay. Pero dime cómo es tu familia y cuántas personas hay. All right, now there's the refrán. Pues en mi familia somos 5. Mi mamá, papá y yo. El abuelito y tía María. El perrotico, el gato limón. Dime cómo es tu familia y cuántas personas hay. Pero dime cómo es tu familia y cuántas personas hay. Mi mamá tiene los ojos azules, el pelo negro y usa lentes también. Mi papá es un poco alto con el pelo castaño, es delgado y se viste muy bien. So what do you have in just that alone? You've got not only that which the linguistic function, talking about and describing your family members, but then what's in there structurally? Oh my heavens, you've got adjectives and adjective agreement. You've got the vocabulary that's focused around the family. And this all becomes subconsciously acquired through the song. And what I do is I actually have kids, I put the teachers in the position of a student. I give them a linguistic function. I give them a few words to support the function and expressions, all right? And then what I do is I have them actually write raps and perform them. That's the important part. ACTFL tells us that, you know, whatever it is we're doing, eventually it's supposed to turn into a performance. And so what happens is that in the end result, if you can get kids together, and I can't tell you how many videos have been sent to me by teachers of their children, risk-taking, being vulnerable, using intuition, self-selection of vocabulary, because why? They are building their own raps with their own vocabulary words that they want to rap about. Inclusion, the fact that when you get a group of kids together, you have all types of attitudes with regard to language and language ability, but they're all up there rapping. So that's an example of it, and it's a fun way to build activities.
Perfect. And you just answered what was going to be my next question, which is what happened in your seminars. I actually have seen you. I've been to some of your presentations at conferences, and that was an example of something that you could expect from one seminar from John D'Amato. So one more time, I want to say thank you so much for giving us all your expertise and your time. And your contact information, you saw them in the slides, but also it's in the Language Learning Summit page. So I encourage everyone to contact John to get the slides or to find out more about the seminars.
Paulino, may I say something to you? Yes. Thank you for what you're doing for language educators. I'm very sincere about this. I think it's magnificent what you're doing, that you're taking your time and your apparent talents to pull all this technology together in the interest of language acquisition. I applaud you. Un aplauso for what you do.
To me. Thank you so much. I am very passionate about language learning. Now, I'm going to say publicly that I did get a suggestion from you about changing the name to Language Acquisition Summit. So I'm thinking about it maybe for next time to go in line with the current research about how we acquire languages. So I'll consider it.
Vamos a ver.
Vamos a ver. Thank you. And to everyone watching, I want to say stay tuned because we are going to come back soon with Catherine Usselin and we're going to be talking about creative, collaborative, and communicative technology, digital tools. So we'll be back just in a few minutes. Don't go anywhere, and we'll see you in about 10 minutes. So stay tuned. We'll have some music until then, and I'll see you soon. Take care.
I'll be here.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Language Learning Summit, our second live session for Saturday, September? It's not September. It's February 17. But we just heard John DeMauro talking about acquisition, and now we have Catherine Uzelin. Ça va? Well, thank you so much for being here to talk about creative, collaborative, and communicative digital tools. You know that I love digital tools, I love technology, and you are the person to talk about it. You are it. You're one of them, yes. Well, to me, you are it, but there are other people to follow as well. And I'm looking forward to see what you have to share with us today. For those of you watching live, please feel free to jump in the chat and with your questions. Or if you are watching the recording, Catherine contact information is in the page, so feel free to contact her or to follow her on social media. So, Catherine, what do you have for us today? I'm Catherine, I'm really sorry. We'll have to start over. I think I made a little mistake. If you could go back and start introducing yourself.
Okay.
We are live now. Sorry, I made a quick mistake with the audio. It should be working right now. Sorry about that. So here we go. Catherine Uzelin with us.
Good morning from Western Washington. Hi, my name is Catherine Uslan, and I'm a French teacher in Mount Vernon, Washington, which is about 20 miles away from the Canadian border, in case you're looking for a fun getaway. So today we're going to be looking at creative, collaborative, and communicative digital tools. And I say this because a lot of schools have been pushing devices onto their teachers saying, here, make your kids use this technology so that we look like we're using technology. And in that moment of desperation, we have the easiest, quickest tools, Catherine Uslan, or Quiz Lives or Quizlet. And that's mostly assessment and acquisition, or learning as some people call it. But today we're going to look more at creative, collaborative, and communicative tools that get your students producing with the language and demonstrating what they have acquired. So a little bit about me. You can find me on the web. I'm in the process of updating my website, although it's still functional. It just needs a little facelift. And I'm always on Twitter. I am always on Twitter. So if you need to find me, just tweet me and we'll get in contact. Or if you're more of an email person, okay? I have lots of roles in the world language community, and it's my pleasure to work with the teachers when I go to workshops around the country, whether in person or with webinars like this. I like to share and mentor and discover with you all. So today we're going to identify and evaluate some web-based tools and some digital apps. So I only use iOS, so Apple products. If you have Androids, I'm sorry, I don't know much about those, but we're going to look at collaboration, production, and assessment. And I always try to use activities for all three modes of communication. Interpersonal can be a little tricky, but there are ways with that. Interpretive is one of the easiest, and presentational is kind of what we'll be looking at most today. I base a lot of my research and my ideas for activities for teachers and students based on the actual core practices. And these have been recently updated, but when you have this presentation later, you can go look at the core practices and see how we're using use target language for learning and the authentic cultural resources is part of the integration of our technology. Another thing that I shared is a lot of schools are still using Common Core language. And I wanted to show teachers, like if they're asking for iPads, how can you ask for apps or devices or both in a way that administrators understand? And I use those fancy words of Common Core standards. And what I built here is a symbol chart with all the Common Core standards for the ELA and then the actual or national world language standards. And I put those side by side and I line those up with the apps that will match those. And I think that's the most empowering thing is when a teacher says, I want to have this app, and the admin says, why? Well, you can go back and say, ELA 1.3 says that we should, and this app will cover that. That's a great way to talk to your administration in a way that he or she understands. But today we're going to also work with some digital storytelling, and that's been my one way to connect with students' creativity so that they know that they're not just memorizing scripts. They're not going to the doctor's office for that visit. To really, show off. Can they draw? Can they use video? Are they great with music? And then really the best part is that we can always push this out to a larger community now. I share my students' products on YouTube, on Twitter, and a little bit on Google Plus when I remember to do that. So that way more people see it. So it's an authentic audience. It's outside of the classroom, and people comment on our products, so on our videos, on our digital skits. It's a great way to make sure that your students know that their voice, their learning, their acquisition is being examined and enjoyed. So like I said, we're trying to get some personal expression with the language. Writing is always the key point that we're trying to help the students develop, is that writing for a purpose, and then helping them develop their proficiency and fluency. So we know that we want to do all of that. We want to be somewhat creative. The first tool I'm going to show you today is called Screencastify. And this is a Chrome extension, which means that if you're using the Chrome browser, you're just going to put this as an add-on, and you have this, and you'll see the and Screencastify is basically a way to record.
Okay, and Catherine,
And
can
I
you
have
hear
3
me?
examples here of digital store, another product, plus, yep.
Yeah, so when you go to a website, the connection breaks up a little bit, so you might want to wait a second for the website to load.
Okay, all right, so I'm going to click on one and then I'll wait.
Okay.
Okay, so the first story example that I'm going to give you is I use Storybird, which is a free site. It allows teachers to grab artwork from different artists that have uploaded, and it's beautiful artwork. And they can take the stories that they create, so they don't have to draw. They put them in an order. We have a theme usually. I say if we're talking about childhood experiences or family experiences. And the students line those up. They make a story, and then they write the text. And then they use Screencastify to narrate the story. So I'm going to click on this one.
Okay, can you hear me?
Are we back?
We are back. Yeah, that was taking a little bit of your bandwidth there. But tell us about it.
Okay. So the students took it's a storybook they created, and they put the pictures in order in the way that they wanted to tell their story. They wrote about it, and then they recorded themselves using Screencastify. So it's basically a screen recorder that allows you to audio over anything that's on the screen. Kind of like what we're doing now, but it records it and saves it as a video, which you can upload it to YouTube, or you can share it through Google, Drive. There's lots of ways you can share that with other people. This doesn't seem to be working so well that I show you the examples, but you'll have the presentation at the end, and that way you can go through and look at all these examples. The second one I did was YouTube, and the students were able to find animated shorts from a playlist that I created for them. They took those animated shorts and they wrote out a basic narration of what was going on. And we sometimes choose animated shorts that don't have any dialogue on, they're just visuals. But if you do find one with a lot of speaking, you can always just hit the mute button on YouTube, and then you would record right over that. So that's a way to get around all that spoken language that's actually in the video. And then we also did this with Google Slides, where my students they were French 2, they were comparing their families to animals based on their personalities. And that was a great production because the students really showed up. What do they think their father would be if he were an animal, and why?
And Catherine, if you want, I can show your video example of Storybird. Would you like me to do that?
That would be great. If you can show those just a few seconds of each one, that would be wonderful.
Okay, I'll show one of them. Give me 1 second.
Either one.
Rapineux s'est réveillé à 7 heures du matin. Il a largement bâillé et il s'est levé lentement. Question de prononciation. Flocon a crié quand ses pieds ont touché le plancher qui était très froid. Flocon a cherché ses pantoufles sous son lit avec ses amis, mais il n'a rien trouvé. Flocon est descendu dans la cuisine et il a salué sa mère qui préparait son petit déjeuner préféré. Il a mangé 3 crêpes et il a bu du chocolat chaud.
Okay, so I showed a few seconds of the video, and it looks like they are just browsing through a book, and then are they reading the story, or are they creating as they see the picture?
No, they pre-wrote the story. That was important because this is the first one he had done of that type. So they have the pictures, they put them in the order, and then they narrated they're reading their story as they flip through the book. Now, as an assessment, I could give them a really basic book and see if they could just do it on the fly, but I usually don't like to terrify students that way.
Okay, great.
Okay, so then you can look at the other ones later on the YouTube. Like I said, it's an animated short, and then the Google Slides, those are pictures that the students chose. They wrote the sentences. And then with Screencastify, they hit the present on Google Slides and just recorded as they worked through their way through the slides. That was really fun. I think the students enjoyed that activity. It was in September, October, so these were brand new students to me, and I wanted to give them that idea of we're going to be learning language in a real relaxed, creative and thoughtful manner.
So let me ask you about the one on YouTube, which I can show as well. Is it they found a video and then they record their voice on top of the video, kind of like doing the
like a voiceover.
Like a voiceover. That sounds fun.
It is. It's great. Now I found 20 different videos for them. I made a playlist, and that playlist but a lot of the students enjoy anime or manga, and so they found some of their own videos. And I said, as long as it was 2 minutes long, that was fine, and that was appropriate for the class. That was great. Mostly animated ones. I haven't had anybody do a live action one yet, but we'll see about that. It's a great way just to get students to take something that's already been produced and then add their.
Well, let me show a couple of seconds of that example of the YouTube video.
Okay.
Linda est entre le poulet au ramasser l'œuf. Le poulet était furieux parce que son œuf. Elle battait des ailes et Linda laissait tomber l'œuf. Le poulet était content, mais Linda était furieuse parce qu'elle a perdu l'œuf. Linda a pris l'œuf, mais le poulet sautait et a pris l'œuf.
Yeah, that looks great.
Yeah. So they enjoyed that. It's the exchange video where the farmer's wife is trying to take the chicken. It has a hilarious ending if you're interested to watch the whole way through later. That's a great one. And the last one, like I said, is just a Google Slides where the students now were responsible for creating the media, plus writing the sentences and then narrating it. So that they took all three jobs.
And I can show that as well. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so I'll show that as an example.
Si ma mère était un animal, elle serait une abeille, parce qu'elles sont travailleuses. Si mon père était un animal, il serait un loup, parce qu'ils sont protecteurs. Si ma sœur était un animal, elle serait une gazelle, parce qu'ils sont vifs. Si mon frère était un animal, il
So in that case, they created slides and then they recorded with a screen. What's the name of it?
With Screencastify.
Screencastify. Okay, great.
Yeah. So a lot of people had
Okay, so because you clicked on present, then your bandwidth took over. So could you please repeat what you just said?
Okay, sorry. A lot of people, I used the second conditional structure, so imperfect plus conditional with French too. And they said, are you teaching that at that level? And I said, actually, no. What we're doing is giving them sentence frames in which they can add in their own information. I don't need to teach the structure. I mean, my mother said it was, if my mother were, she would be. So they already have that chunk, and they can use it, for I, you, he, and she forms. So it was a great way to introduce a different level of communication in a fun way. So we're going to go on if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I won't be clicking on any of these, but some other ways to do digital storytelling, if you don't like Screencastify, would be to use Adobe Spark Video, and that's either a web-based or an app-based. And a lot of teachers love this. I mean, it is very easy to use. You grab a picture, you can put text on it, and then you can record and make a short video. WeVideo does the same thing. I only use the free version of it. It's just a way to pull in. So it's a basic video editor, and you can pull in the pictures that you want or pull in the video, and then you can narrate over it. And Animoto, that's been around for a long time. A lot of people don't use it as much as they should or want to because they think you have to pay for it. But actually, there is a teacher subscription, and then your students' accounts are free. You just need to write Animoto, and I put the link in there and say, I'm a teacher, here's my school email, and they will give you free access for teachers. Animoto makes amazing videos, so you get to choose the music that goes behind it, and then you can add your own pictures or videos. You can add some text, you can use some captions, and it creates one of those fancy production type videos. Lots of fun. It gets kids motivated. Become producers with their language. And that's what digital storytelling is that instead of, how can I say this gently? Instead of writing out just the sentences, they're now taking their language and showing what it actually means to them. So they choose those visuals to help support their knowledge of the language and the structures and vocabulary. Okay. I'm a big fan of digital storytelling. We do it many times. If you're an iOS person, these are some apps that you can use like Shadow Puppet and Show Me, Little Bird Tales, and Book Creator. And those are all great ways to have your students either produce books or videos or just simple little videos like Shadow Puppet. That's the first one I used when I got my iPods about 6 years ago. Always a great way to, if you say I'm not a technology person, I'm afraid of tech, I would start with the Shadow Puppet iOS app. And now Shadow Puppet works with Seesaw. So you can kind of go back and forth with those two platforms, and students can tell their stories and then share them on the Seesaw platform, which I'll show you in a few minutes. So I didn't know, Paulina, if there's any questions or if you had any comments.
No, we're doing great, and these are great.
Okay. Awesome. So one last thing I'd show, a lot of teachers are using infographics as part of their authentic resources. So they're having students read, so they're doing the interpretive mode. And I said, well, how about we generate them? How about the students create their own surveys, and then they go around and ask, classmates and teachers, their community, ask the questions that they wrote. So they have to write the questions in French, but then they ask their friends who are non-French speakers in English. They compile the data, and then we use Easily, but there's also Infogram and Pictochart. Those are great infographic creators. The students can grab the icons that represent their information and then do the stats, the number crunching, which you can go back to the math teachers and they will love you for introducing stats into the class. And two ways you can do this. Either you can save this as a JPEG, or you can actually use Screencastify to narrate your infographic, where the students would be explaining the statistics, the outcomes, the results. Either way, we like to share and compare what's going on in our community based on an infographic that we read in class. Lots of ways to compare, so for winter sports or vacations, how many cars do you own in your family? What are the best ways to spend a weekend? There's lots of cultural comparisons that can happen if you're using an infographic, one that you read in class, and then one that your produces. So those are good three. They're all free if I remember right. Pictochart does have a paid version available. So here's where we have a situation, Paulina, because I wanted to show these three websites, but it looks like either I would have to send it to you or something, because they have my login required. Well, how would you like to do that?
I'm not sure if we have time to exchange that information right now,
Okay.
but we can explain how these websites work. Yeah.
Okay. So Seesaw is what a lot of teachers are using. I use the free, as you can tell, I like free options. Seesaw is sort of like Facebook in a way that there's a feed. Okay, so all the students are in a class and all of their work shows up in that feed, and it's private for the class, but you can invite parents or admin, and that's important. The parents of the admin would only be able to see the student that they've signed up for. So the admin, I would make a teacher in the class, and the parent I would make just for his or her student. So on Seesaw, this is what you can do. You can take a picture and you can draw on it and add an audio note, and you can add stamps, and basically you can Snapchat it. That's really what my students called it the other day. They said, this is Snapchat, but it's in a feed that stays permanent. I love it because the students can keep track of all the products that they've created in one place. So this is a portfolio website. Since they can do drawing and reading, and they can take video, they can pull in a Google Doc, they can pull in so many of their artifacts that they've created. And basically, they've got a nice little suitcase to take with them either to the next class or to the next phase in life. That's a great one. I've been pushing that, and I think Seesaw has got a lot of great professional development online. If you need to learn how to use it, contact me or them. So Flipgrid I use, not as much this year. I'm experimenting with so many different tools. Flipgrid Fever, it's on Twitter everywhere. This is a way for teachers to put out a question, and so they can put a prompt out, and then all the students record a video answer to that, to the prompt. And then the students can reply to each other. And Flipgrid can be shared publicly. So you could ask native speakers from around the world the same question and get answers from places that students have never been to or maybe never even heard of.
And Catherine, we do have a Flipgrid for the Language Learning Summit.
I saw that.
So
that should be something I'm going to do right after we're done here.
I'll share it later on Twitter and on Facebook page. We have a version for language teachers who want to share what they're passionate about, or for language learners to share what they're learning.
And you know Laura Sexton by chance? Laura has been, she's a Spanish teacher in North Carolina or South Carolina, one of those two. She has a Flipgrid chart for native speakers of Spanish at certain levels. And you can get in with her so that your students can watch the native speakers' answers to the questions that she's asked. This powerful tool allows us to get the video that we want. Instead of having to search, we find the native speaker, we ask them the question, and there we have 30 different answers. Let's Recap is really similar to Flipgrid. It's all free. And it is more, I want to say, diverse, complex, because you can add documents. So the students would, it's like a web quest. Students read a document or they look at a web page and then they respond to it. Other students can have a conversation about their reactions to the document. And it builds a beautiful, like, constructed idea of how students looked at something or read something or understood something. So I haven't used it as much. I have an account and I play around with it when I'm not trying all these other things out. So those are some great, they can be formative or summative on these. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next one. And Polino, you've seen this before, and I'm not going to click on any of these, but I decided to take the actual statement on technology and pull out, because it's kind of a wordy document, and pull out the most important ideas from actual statement on using technology. And I basically found an app or a website that will meet each one of these ideals. Now, when you get onto this presentation, you take your cursor and you can click right on these, and it will take you to that website. Definitely want to use this, because a lot of teachers say, well, I know all these tools, but I don't know how to use them or for which manner to use them. So you have the listening and viewing authentic, engaging, and timely materials from the target culture. Many teachers are using Edpuzzle. I think that's one of the most popular ones out there. It's where you take a video from YouTube or TEDx or wherever, you can pull it into Edpuzzle and then add questions directly onto the video. So the students are watching the video, it pauses, the question comes up. It can either be a multiple choice question or fill in your own answer. If it's a multiple choice, they can, they'll know their score right away because you put in the correct answer. If it's a student open response, you, the teacher, will go back and just check it over and assign the point value for that answer. Play pause it is very similar. Again, you pull in a video. I don't know if they have the same gradebook set up. I don't use it as much. Formative, I love formative. I need to be using it more. It's a platform where you can do different types of assessments by pulling in either audio, video, or text. And it looks like a PowerPoint presentation where the students are clicking through so that you can have one slide be the material and the next slide is the question. And so you can get automatic feedback based on what the students understood right there and then. Love that site. And it's free. The last little icon there is audio podcasts for French teachers. A lot of teachers ask, well, what podcasts would be good for my students to listen to? And I've been going through, I've got about 50 different podcasts that are good for either teachers or students or both at different levels. And those are just listed there for you. If you're not a French teacher, maybe share that with a colleague. I'm hoping the Spanish teachers get a list together so that they have a kind of a comprehensive resource packet for their colleagues. Now you see that Flipgrid again. Oops, let's put off of that.
So Catherine, we have a question from Norbert that says, with so many apps, which one do you use the most? And is there one or two that students like the most?
Edpuzzle is the most preferred of all the apps for interpretive assessments or activities. So that's where they pull in the video. Seesaw is the app that I prefer to collect all of my students' performances or activities. And I was going to show you ThingLink coming up here soon, but usually if I'm going to give you two, it would be Edpuzzle and Seesaw. I have to go back a sentence. There's Seesaw. And then Screencastify. So I do Screencastify just for digital storytelling, but I could do it for other purposes. Like if I wanted to make a video for my students to explain a concept or for them to listen to me telling a story. So Screencastify, and then Seesaw, and then Edpuzzle. Those are my top three. How about that?
Perfect.
I give options. Yeah, I give options because there are some people who don't like a certain platform or the way they mostly work the same way. You know, if you copy paste the link, you push it into the tool, the video pops up. That works for both Edpuzzle and PlayPosit. But some people have they like the look of the site better. So on the second row, you have practicing interpersonal skills as they interact via video, audio, or text. You have Skype in the classroom. I don't know if a lot of teachers are using that, but Skype has created teachers from around the world who want to do Skypes with other classes. So you could find a teacher in Chile who wants to practice their English, and then you say to the teacher, okay, we'll practice our English, you practice your Spanish, and you can have a Skype mystery hangout where you make questions and try and guess where the other classroom is. That's a lot of fun. I've done that once or twice with my colleagues up in Canada, which was pretty easy for us to find. And the last one is a link to the mystery hangout if you're interested in participating in one. I think there's quite a few teachers who are also looking for guest presenters. So if there's an author, or we were trying to get the French astronaut to participate with us. He's very busy with French and Canadian students, but I hope we're in his line. And so we've got a lot of ways to connect outside the world with interpersonal skills via technology. And we have one more slide. And more information, of course. This is the presentational aspect, the presentational mode, where students can collaborate. So a lot of us have used Padlet, and I know there's 50 different ways to use Padlet, and now you can actually do more. Evidently, Nicole Naditz put out that students can draw and add video and add audio right onto the Padlet board. If you ever need some suggestions, you can go to on how to use it. I have a blog that shows all of my technology use. The same thing with ThingLink. I offer that as an option. It's ThingLink is where you take one picture and then you populate the picture with tags so that you're talking about the picture. You can add video, you can add text, you can put links to websites. It's like taking your workbook with that label of the parts of the body picture, if you think about it that way. And then instead of writing the words, you're adding all of this media to make the picture come to life. That is a powerful tool. So if I'm going to say number 4 on my list of must tries, ThingLink. Now, ThingLink is a paid subscription. The free version is very minimal, and I think it's still very good, very powerful. But I pay the subscription, I think, about $60 a year. Okay, now most of us, our school districts are either using like Google Docs, so it's a Google Apps for Education type school, or if you're in the Office 365 realm, there are so many ways that you can make presentations that are collaborative, so each student is working on a slide, and then all of their work is in one place. Students can comment on each other's work. They can add videos, they can add audio. This right now is the most collaborative time for the students that I've ever seen. Although I do ask them to do a lot of the face-to-face work first and then pull their ideas together. So they're not just sitting on a Chromebook by themselves typing away. That starts to take away the purpose of our curriculum, is that we are learning how to communicate face-to-face. So our students are not on Chromebooks every day. They are mostly talking to each other or interacting with authentic materials in front of them. And then we go for the technology to support their learning. Okay, so at the bottom, I have students work at their own pace as they access online content or use programs. And that's more of the assessment grounds, or the formative. That's the one I talked about earlier, where it's sort of like a PowerPoint with all sorts of activities plus assessments. Socrative is a quiz site, and it's free, where you can add in media and questions, and you can do self-correcting answers or self-correcting questions. Very helpful because you can keep track of questions. Explain Everything is also another digital storytelling type of app and website where the students can explain their knowledge through video or through pictures with text. And then there's Nearpod, which I have not used as much. I did when it was first started out, but our school went towards other products. Nearpod and Explain Everything are somewhat similar in that the students take their knowledge, put it together, and explain it, or the teacher packages up experiences for the students and has assessments built into it. So Formative and Nearpod are very similar. Okay, well, I said that was the last slide, but I was wrong. Sorry, Polina, do we have enough time for this one?
We do.
Okay, cool. These last few are just more discrete skills. So these are I put them last because I think it's important to assess the students, of course. I think we need to give them support. So Quizlet and Kia has been around since I started teaching in 2002, I think, maybe 2003. Duolingo, it has its ups and downs. It has really weird vocabulary. And then one of my favorites is Languages Online, and that's for several languages. It's just basic vocabulary with a native speaker and pictures. So if you've never been on Languages Online, they have body parts, animals, numbers. It's for those students who are really struggling and they say, where can I go for extra help just for the vocabulary?
And Catherine,
that's where I would send them.
Catherine, we have Natalia watching live asking, how old are your students?
I have high school students who are 14 to 18 years old.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Kia, if you haven't ever used Kia, I mean, most of us use that back in the early days where it's multiple choice. There's some HTML flash games, Battleship. It's a fun way to get kids to review. It looks a little 2000s, and I'm okay with that because the kids find it rather engaging. There's a Rags to Riches game, which is like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and they want to win. They will play that game 15 times in a row, and then I say, stop. Okay. The other ways that we can do this is by pulling in multiple applications to assess and assign activities. These can like an LMS for some people, but I think it's a little bit more flexible than some like Schoology, I believe, is an LMS that a lot of teachers use. So Seesaw, LearnSpace, Edulastic, and Google Classroom. And I'm currently using Google Classroom in a certain way. I have it tied to my website and it's tied to Seesaw. So that's just my experiences. I know how to blend all of these websites. I always say to teachers, you know, find the platform that fits you best and then play around with one or two and see if you can integrate into the big picture little apps that help support your students. So in your Google Classroom, you could put a link to a Quizlet activity. So that's one way to do it. And I believe Quizlet allows you to assign cards through Classroom. So that's the way that those two can work together. Just by adding links to the Google Classroom or to your Edulastic, you're showing your students, okay, here's our content and here's where you can get extra practice. Okay, so I'm probably gonna see if there are any questions, or we can play around with, you know, seeing if you could see my Seesaw. But if you have any questions, you should try and find me somewhere online. I'm always grateful when I get little email messages or tweets asking, you know, Catherine, how can I do this, or what can I do for that? I have about 500 tools on my website, and although I'm cleaning it up, it's still really user-friendly. I hope that there's something on here that will be helpful for you and your students. And throw out questions.
Well, we could try to get to one of your websites. I just want to let everybody know that I just posted the link to Catherine's presentation in the chat, and it will also be in her presenters page at the Language Learning Summit. So go ahead and play around with that presentation that you just saw, because it includes all the links to all these sites so you can explore them a little more.
Absolutely. So should I try the Seesaw?
Let's try it.
Okay, I'm going to click on it here. this is Seesaw. Can you see this okay?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. And Paulina, are we still okay?
Yes, it's cutting off a little bit, but we can see.
Okay, so this is my period 6 French 2 class. And this is where they take a picture and they're having a conversation about what they want to do if they went to Quebec Carnival. So this is an example of where students will take a picture of an animal and describe it. So they found and add their audio right down here, and we can download it if necessary. This is where the students were making their own infographics by hand by asking each other questions. What did you do over winter break? So they made the pie charts based on their findings and then had to read the number results and the activities. There's lots of things to do with the chart. We're going to lot of chart at the moment because a lot of kids did those.
Okay, yeah, unfortunately we're breaking up a little bit, but I want to ask you if you can remind us, this could be made a completely private, correct?
Yes, to begin with.
Okay, can you answer that again?
Yep. This is completely, Seesaw is completely private to begin with.
Okay.
There's a way to make it a blog so that anyone in the world can see your students' products, but to begin with, the students can only see each other's work or not. You can turn that off as well. And then you can invite parents in and they'll only see their children. And then the admin can be invited in as a teacher. And that's really helpful because when you're trying to demonstrate the learning that is going on in your room, there's the proof in the pudding, as we say.
Okay, excellent. So I think we could stop. You could stop sharing the screen right now because we have covered a lot of materials today. And as I said, the link to Catherine's session that you just saw is in the chat. If you're in the live page of the Language Learning Summit, or if you go to her session page, you can find the link. Well, I'm going to post the links very soon now before I leave, so that you can explore this deeply. But hopefully this was helpful for many people to discover some new site. Norbert says, a lot of apps to pick from. Thank you for sharing, Catherine.
Thank you, Norbert. I always push out to people. People know me as a technology person, and I always say, actually, I'm the curriculum writer who knows how to use technology to support the curriculum. We want communication first, not the technology. Just finding an app is awesome, but you have to think, how am I going to thoughtfully integrate this so it's a meaningful experience for my students? Everything that I've gone through in the past 15 years with technology, I mean, I used to overwhelm my students with technology, like every day a new app, and they said, stop, we want to color. Okay, now I've learned. But whenever you're stuck, think about how can I encourage my students to come over their fear of being on video. That's a big one. We're working on that right now because we're going to be doing a green screen with Do Ink. I don't know if you've ever heard of that app, but it's a green screen. The students are going to be sharing their exploration of Paris. So they're going to have Paris monuments and places in the background. Plus they're going to be pushing in videos, and they are terrified of having to present on camera. So I show them these types of things and say, hey, I'm doing it. Let's try it out. Let's practice and see how we can build our skills that we're going to transfer them to the next part of our lives. So technology isn't just for language learning. It is helping produce students who are going to be active participants in a global community and have the skills to do it.
Excellent. Yes. John DeMato was talking about risk-taking, and the risk-taking is not just in the language production, but doing things with the languages also could be taking a risk, because when we immerse ourselves maybe in a country where the language is spoken, we are taking those risks, just maybe going into a bakery and trying to buy some baguette,
You know, the first time I had those French 2 students doing the Google Slides, they said, I don't like hearing my voice. I said, nobody likes hearing our voices. I mean, we have them, so we'll have to use them. I think when we do these in little chunks, these experiences for them, they get used to the idea of my voice in Spanish, my voice in French sounds different. And you've actually seen that research where your personality changes a little bit depending on the language you're using. And I said, get used to your French mouth. Get used to this words coming out, and you're going to feel like, when John was talking about owning it, ownership of the language comes with confidence. And how do you get confidence? Is by practice and experiences. So that when you finally do go into the bakery and say, you know, j'aimerais bien une baguette, you know, that comes out so much better than saying baguette, s'il vous plaît. No, that's okay. That's communication.
That's communication as well. Thank you, Catherine, for your time and for sharing your expertise. Again, if you want to connect with her on the Language Learning Summit page for Catherine, you can find her website with more than 500 tools, but also a way to contact her because she's very responsive on social media. So thank you for your time, and I'll see you again sometime online or in some conference.
Thank you so much. Every year, every time you do these, Lapolino, massive applause.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. Take care. And for everyone out there still watching or watching the recording, we have more live sessions coming up at the Language Learning Summit. Today, Saturday, February 17 at 8 p.m., we have an interview with a multilingual actor, Big Bang. And tomorrow, Sunday, February 18th, also at 8 p.m., let's talk about professional development with Nicole Naditz. So 2 more sessions this weekend, 8 p.m. on Saturday, multicultural and multilingual actor Big Bang, and Sunday at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. Let's talk about professional development with Nicole Naditz. And please go to languagelearningsummit.com, click on schedule, and see all the sessions we have planned for this week. And of course, keep watching all those talks. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.